Hello. Today's episode number 15 of the Professor Slots podcast discusses legal gaming classifications established at the federal level and therefore in common use at the state level, plus slot machine casino gambling in the U.S. state of Hawaii. Thank you for joining me for the Professor Slots podcast show. I'm John Friedel, and this is the podcast about slot machine casino gambling. It is where I provide the knowledge, insights, and tools for helping you improve your slot machine gambling performance. Show notes are available within most podcast apps or at professorslots.com/E15.
John Friedel from the Professor Slots blog reveals all his tips and tricks for thriving in the casino environment. Choose winning slot machines and identify your gambling goals. Being entertained, earning comps, winning take-home cash, or combining them. John has won 90 taxable jackpots and a luxury car in 9 months of slot play and made a profit at slots gambling since 2013.
Remember to visit professorslots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Let's get started with the first segment of the show, legal gaming classifications. Legally accepted gaming classifications are available to state gaming boards to restrict which class of slot machines can be used in a casino or other gaming area. Specifically, these are Class 1, 2, and 3. All 3 classifications are in limited use by states for non-tribal casino operators, that is to say commercial casinos, but are fully in use at all Indian gaming establishments. At this time, only Hawaii and Utah continue to prohibit all 3 classifications of gaming. In 1987, tribes began operating high-stakes bingo and other gaming programs. State governments became frustrated over their lack of authority and appealed to the U.S. Congress for legislation. The first federal gaming structure for Indian gaming was established in 1988 with the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, that is to say IGRA, enacted as a U.S. federal law. The stated purposes of the act include 1. Providing a legislative basis for the operation and regulation of Indian gaming. 2. Protecting gaming as a means of generating revenue for the tribes. 3. Encouraging economic development of these tribes. And 4. Protecting the enterprises from negative influences, such as organized crime. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act is a 1988 United States federal law that establishes the jurisdictional framework that governs Indian gaming. Before this act, there was no federal gaming structure. The IGRA was enacted to regulate the conduct of gaming on Indian lands, establishing not only the regulatory structure for Indian gaming in the United States, but also the National Indian Gaming Commission. Tribal gaming is regulated by 1. Individual tribal governments, 2. The U.S. Congress, 3. The U.S. Department of the Interior, 4. The National Indian Gaming Commission, and 5. By states under the terms of negotiated tribal-state gaming compacts with federally recognized tribes. The IGRA sets forth an economic rationale for Indian gaming on reservations. According to Congress, the major purpose of the act was, quote, to provide a statutory foundation for Indian gambling operations as a means of promoting economic development, self-sufficiency, and strong tribal government, end quote. Additional purposes of the IGRA was, 1. To assure that tribal governments would be the sole owners and beneficiaries of reservation gaming programs. 2. To establish federal regulatory authority and gaming standards. 3. To establish the National Indian Gaming Commission. And 4. To assure the integrity of tribal gaming. The Act establishes 3 classes of games with a different regulatory scheme for each, which are, simply enough, Class 1, 2, and 3. I will explain each classification shortly. But first, why are these classifications important outside of tribal gaming? If you've been listening to my episode segments on state gaming regulations, or are reading ahead with the blogs on my website at professorslots.com/state, you may have begun to notice, as I have, the relatively diverse definitions for gambling from state to state. In essence, state legislation on gambling has to first define a term and then write gaming regulations around it. Some states create situations or regulatory loopholes which can be exploited. For example, in a future episode, I'll talk about Illinois slot machine casino gambling. In Illinois, slot machines were once deemed legal by the state, but only at truck stops. But because the word truck stops wasn't fully defined, businesses at which a truck might stop, such as the corner bar, began applying for a gambling license from the state under this law. Now there are quite a few local bars with slot machines in Illinois. Be sure to keep listening to the Professor Slots podcast to learn more about Illinois slot machine casino gambling in 2 more podcast episodes. The point I'm trying to make here is sometimes gambling definitions are needed or useful at a federal level to have some sort of consistency across all of the U.S. states, territories, and federal district. While this consistency has not been created for the term truck stops, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 did establish classifications for different types of gaming, which is now commonly used by many states as a standard definition within state gaming regulations for non-tribal commercial casinos. Here is what the 3 classifications mean. Class 1 gaming is defined as 1. Traditional Indian gaming as part of tribal ceremonies and celebrations, and 2. Social gaming for minimal prizes. Regulatory authority over this type of gaming falls entirely to tribal governments and is not otherwise subject to IGTA requirements. Class 2 gaming is defined as the game of chance known as bingo, aided or not aided by any electronics, and other games similar to bingo if played at the same location. It also applies to games played exclusively against another player rather than against the house or a player acting as a bank. Expressly excluded from Class 2 gaming are banking games, such as blackjack, or slot machines of any kind. Tribal governments are the primary legal entity responsible for regulating Class 2 games on its lands under the jurisdiction of the National Indian Gaming Commission, as long as 1. The state in which the tribe is located permits such gaming for any purpose, and 2. The tribal government adopts a self-gaming ordinance approved by the National Indian Gaming Commission. Class 3 gaming is generally referred to as casino-style gaming. It has a broad definition and includes all forms of gaming not specifically called out in Classes 1 and 2. Games commonly played at casinos clearly fall into Class 3 category, including slot machines, blackjack, craps, roulette, wagering games, and electronic facsimiles of any game of chance. As restricted by the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988, before a tribe can lawfully conduct Class 3 gaming, these conditions must be met. 1. The particular form of Class 3 gaming the tribe wants to conduct must be permitted in the state the tribe is located. 2. The tribe and state must have negotiated a compact approved by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, or the U.S. Secretary of the Interior must have approved regulatory procedures, a so-called negotiated tribal-state compact. And 3. The tribe must have adopted a tribal gaming ordinance approved by the chairman of the Indian Gaming Commission. The regulatory scheme for Class 3 gaming is complex, with key functions for approval authority resting with several organizations at the federal, state, commission, and tribal levels. In summary, accepted legal gaming classifications are available to state gaming boards to restrict gambling by type, specifically Class 1, tribal ceremonies, Class 2, bingo, and Class 3, everything else. All 3 classifications are in limited use by states for non-tribal casino operators, but are fully in use at all Indian gambling establishments. At this time, only Hawaii and Utah continue to prohibit all 3 classifications of gaming. The first pro tip for today's episode is for those slots enthusiasts that happen to gamble at a tribal casino. To be open, a tribal casino must have negotiated a state tribal compact approved by the U.S. Department of the Interior. So the gaming regulations under which it operates can only be found within that state tribal compact. My suggestion, my pro tip, is for tribal casino slot enthusiasts to try to find that state tribal compact and take a look at it. It won't always be available within your state because the decision was made to not make it publicly available, but some are. So please check if it is available to you. Many times now I've mentioned the value to seeing what your state gaming commission has to offer for commercial casinos. It's often high value, from payout returns to crime statistics. If you frequent a tribal casino, what you need to find is an equivalent, which is a copy of the state tribal compacts. It too is very likely to contain useful information. Remember to visit ProfessorSlots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Show notes for this episode are now available within most podcast apps, but are also available on my website at ProfessorSlots.com/E15. Up next is the second segment of the show, Hawaii Slot Machine Casino Gambling. In this episode segment, I provide a brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, U.S. territory, or U.S. federal district. While I'll present some aspects of the overall gambling situation within that specific state, territory, or federal district, my emphasis by far will be focused on anything of interest to slot machine casino gamblers. Each state-by-state episode segment can be expected to include an introduction, relevant legal statutes on gambling, if any, slot machine private ownership, state gaming commission, if any, gambling establishments, if any, and a summary. My introduction for Hawaii slots once again pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the availability of slots in the U.S. state of Hawaii. Here goes. Hawaii slot machine casino gambling is among the most uncompromising of any U.S. state. Hawaii prohibits all forms of gambling, including slot machines, table games, lotteries, horse or dog racing, sports betting, or even bingo. Social gaming is allowed, with restrictions, which can potentially be extended to other types of gaming such as craps. The primary reason why Hawaii has not embraced gambling is somewhat unique. Frankly, there's no profit to it. An economic study was performed by the state. The potential increase of state tax revenue due to allowing gambling is estimated to be between $20 million and $40 million for Hawaii. However, Hawaii's known generated revenue from tourism for a property of equivalent size is $1 billion. Simply put, Hawaii doesn't need or want gambling money. They make 33 times more from tourism. Regarding relevant legal statutes on gambling, social gaming is the only type of gambling that can be enjoyed without breaking Hawaiian gaming regulations. Craps may potentially be allowed, as some view it to fall under this category. This is another excellent example of each state's definition of terms, as mentioned in the earlier episode segment. Social gaming was defined less than precisely, and now there is a legal point of view that craps is social gaming rather than illegal gambling, because, as all craps players understand, craps is a very social game. Further, according to Hawaiian state law, social gaming is allowed when 1. All participants must be 18 or older. 2. No corporation may benefit from the game, which prohibits the sale of food and drinks at such events. 3. All players begin the game on level terms. 4. The house does not receive a percentage of the profits. And 5. The game may not be conducted inside a business or in view of the public. Gambling in Hawaii is considered a misdemeanor offense under most circumstances. It can become a felony if an individual receives more than $1,000 per day in lottery bet income and 5 bookmarking wagers per day with a value over $500. Daily Fantasy Sports has come under scrutiny from Hawaiian lawmakers, who have gone on the public record as expressing their opinion that Daily Fantasy Sports is gambling. Next up is a usually short statement about slot machine private ownership, which I have included in case you live in this U.S. state and are considering owning a slot machine there. Here it is. All slot machines are prohibited in Hawaii. Regarding state gaming commissions in Hawaii, as all forms of gambling are considered illegal, and there is no state lottery either, Hawaii has not yet established a state gaming commission. In this next section, I'll discuss Hawaiian gambling establishments. As you might now suspect, there are none. However, interestingly enough, horse racing was once popular on the Hawaiian Islands, enjoyed by the royal family and the financial elite in the 1800s and early 1900s. The industry nearly died out prior to 1920, but made a strong, if short-lived, comeback during World War II. In summary, gambling laws in Hawaii are among the most uncompromising of any U.S. state. Hawaii prohibits all forms of gambling, including slot machines, table games, lotteries, horse or dog racing, sports betting, or even bingo. Remember to visit ProfessorSlots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Up next is the third segment of the show, What to Expect from John Friedel, Professor Slots, in 2018. First of all, I hope that everyone is having a wonderful start to the new year. With the beginning of a new year upon us, I thought it reasonable to mention my plans for Professor Slots for 2018. At the moment, I have a Professor Slots website and podcast. These two ways of supporting my audience of slots enthusiasts is supported by a social media presence on Twitter with over 13,000 followers, nearly 4,000 page likes on my Facebook page, and a couple thousand followers on Instagram. For those interested, my Twitter account is @ProfessorSlots. My Facebook page is facebook.com/ProfessorSlots. And my Instagram account is a little harder to remember, so I've set up an easy-to-remember link. Just use ProfessorSlots.com/Instagram, and you'll be taken directly to my Instagram account. The final way I reach out to my customers involves email, which will be my main focus of attention in 2018. Why? Because my business goal, the best way I know to provide my audience of slot enthusiasts exactly what you are looking for, is to build an audience of slot enthusiasts so that I can ask them that question. In other words, in 2018, I'm working primarily on building my audience of slot enthusiasts. I don't want to guess what you want. I want to know what you want. Is it a long, detailed ebook to read? Do you want a monthly subscription paid community? Online courses? Personal coaching? On-site speaking engagements at your local casinos? I'm technically prepared to do any of these things, but I don't want to guess. To properly ask you these questions, to send out a simple survey, I need to collect the emails of a relatively large number of slots enthusiasts. My research suggests that 2,000 email subscribers is a good number, but perhaps only 1,000 will be necessary to really get started. Between you and me, as of a few minutes ago, I'm currently at 163 email subscribers. Which brings me to my second pro tip of this episode. Today's pro tip number 2 is sign up to my email list so I can grow an audience to have a business justification to develop slots-related products that will help you win at slots. On my website and in my podcast episodes, I don't tell you how to win in much detail as I could. Why? Because what I've learned and figured out is truly valuable. I believe it truly is valuable. And just giving it away for free isn't a good business plan. Yes, I give away tips and try to explain how the technology has changed in advantageous ways, as well as talk about history and publicly available information. While all this is designed to be interesting and even useful, it isn't the same as a clear and succinct 7-step process to winning consistently at playing slot machines. So my pro tip suggestion to you is to sign up to my email subscription. In return, you'll immediately receive my free report revealing, well, you know the rest. As usual, it's available at professorslots.com/subscribe. Doing so will allow me to provide more value to you later this year and even greater content in subsequent years. If nobody signs up, or not enough people sign up to make it all worthwhile, well, that basically tells me not to bother, and maybe start a podcast about being an Asperger's individual. So sign up at professorslots.com/subscribe for my free report. You also get a short series of emails once per day for 5 days on the topics presented in my first few podcast episodes. After that, it'll only be one email a week to let you know about new content available on my website and podcast. In about a year, perhaps less, when I reach 1,000 or 2,000 email subscribers, I'll send out a survey asking you what you think about what I should provide. Thanks so much. If you'd like to provide a rating and review for this podcast, which may well help other slot enthusiasts decide to take a listen to one or more of my episodes, simply use your podcast app. Visit professorslots.com/Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple device user, or visit professorslots.com/Android for Android users. Part 1 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is 7 Advantages of Players Clubs. Part 2 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is another brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, territory, or federal district. Next time, I'll be talking to you about the U.S. state of Idaho. That's the end of another great episode of the Professor Slots podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Show notes for this episode could be found within most podcast apps or at professorslots.com/E15. I plan to have the next episode come out very soon for you, where I'll have more amazing content for the show. Please subscribe to and review the show. That would help so much. To do so, simply use your podcast app, visit professorslots.com/Apple Podcasts, or visit professorslots.com/Android. Until the next episode, have fun, be safe, and make good choices.